All right, we're going to get started, and we are going to start with a net to seller problem. Now, that's just the term for it, but usually these problems are like, okay, the seller wants to net or take home this amount of money. What needs to be the minimum sales price so that they can take home what they need, pay their bills, and pay you a commission? So, even though a lot of states call them a net to seller, I like to call them a minimum sales price because that's what you're trying to figure out. What's the minimum that this house could sell for? And it's one that you're actually going to have to do once you get licensed. If you're helping people list their properties and sell their properties, they need to know what the bottom line is so that they're making enough money.
Okay.
So the first step to any math problem, of course, is to read it. A seller received $155,925 after a commission of 5.5% was paid to the listing firm. What was the sales price? So tell me what you would do, and then I'll see if that is right or if it is wrong.
Okay. Seller received 150 at the commission of. So what I would do is first convert the percentages by moving it two spaces. So I would make it 0.055
Okay.
and multiply that by the 155,925.
So we're not going to actually do that, and let me explain why.
Okay.
So let's say I won the lottery. And if I won the lottery, maybe I won $1,000. Or maybe I won $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
If we talk about something like 10%, would you agree 10% of $1,000 would be, $100?
Right.
But 10% of $100,000, I mean, that's going to be a lot bigger. Do you get what I'm saying there?
Yes.
And that's because you're taking a percentage of a larger number. So if that makes sense, and I'm just kind of going through it step by step here, let's erase that. Let's imagine a minimum sales price. You ever remember learning about like fractions and percentages and they put it in a circle wheel? You know what I'm talking
They
about?
do.
So like they'll say, oh, well, this is 100%.
Right.
So from these problems, our per 100% is the minimum sales price. Because you need 100% of whatever that number is in order to cover everything. And in
Okay.
this story, this seller is going to have to pay out a 5.5% commission and they need $155,925. So all of that together, the 155,925 plus a 5.5% commission equals 100% of their needed or their minimum price. Does that make sense? Yes.
Yes.
So what you did was, and I'll use a different color, is you said, let me find 5.5% of this number, of all of this. The problem is when you get paid a commission, when you become an agent, did you want to get paid off a part of the sales price or did you want to get paid off of the entire sales price?
The entire sales price.
So does that make sense why you can't do the 5%? You can't find 5.5% off of the 155,925 because you're finding 5% of the smaller number and we want 5% of the
Larger
whole.
number.
Great. But that's okay because this image works with us. If this part is 5.5%, then so if all of this is 5.5%, what is the percentage for the rest of the circle? If all of it is 100% and we take away 5.5%, what does it make the rest of that orange? What percentage of the circle is left over if you take out 5.5%?
Okay, I see what you're saying. So that's when you're subtracting the
Mm-hmm.
5.5% from the
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Yep. So what do you get when you do that?
Wait a minute. 94.5.
There you go. So 94.5% I call the EBC because I say that number is everything but the commission.
Okay.
Everything he needs, that 155,925 plus he needs a commission. So that 155,925 is the EBC, or the everything but commission.
Okay.
So what we know is $155,925 is not 100% of what this seller needs. That is 94.5%
5%.
of the minimum sales price.
Okay.
And now that we've got that sentence, we can solve for the minimum sales price. So we can
We're going to
do,
multiply that.
well, we're not going to multiply, we're going to divide.
Okay.
$155,000 is 94.5% of some larger number. So we divide. Sometimes that is, I think of it as being a dividing sign. So I'm going to
Okay.
do 155,925 divided by 94.5% equals, and what do you get when you do that math?
165,000.
165,000. And that is your answer. I'm just going to do the math too, just to make sure, because I don't have an answer key right here. Divided by 94.5%. Yep, 165,000.
Okay.
So tell me, how does it make sense? You feeling good about that one?
It does make sense. I just, like explained, oftentimes I get mixed up on exactly what to do.
Mm-hmm.
When I see the problem.
Mm-hmm. So for ones like this, usually you'll see words will be like after a commission, or sometimes it'll say the seller, that's a W, wants to net. Will sometimes say that because they're asking about a sales price. Like they're not talking about somebody purchased it. We're trying to find what was that sales price? We don't have an interest rate. We don't, anything like that. We need to know, what's that minimum sales price?
Hmm.
Sometimes it'll say minimum sales price too.
Okay.
Let's try another one. So this one says, what is the least amount Karen must sell her home for if she must pay a $262,619 first mortgage, a secondary mortgage of $13,000, and a $25,000 line of credit, as well as paying her broker 5.5%. So the
Mm.
key to this one is, it says, what is the least amount that she must sell her home for? Do you see how that kind of relates back to what's the minimum sales price?
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. And whenever I get problems like these, I just go ahead and I like to draw out the circle, because I know that circle is 100% of the minimum.
Right.
And what I
Oh,
always know is, there's always a commission in these problems. There better be, because I'm getting paid. So it just so happens to be 5.5% again. But we could be 6%, it could be 8%, it could be 2%. It's whatever.
mhm.
And
Mhm.
now we need to know what other monies this seller needs to get. So according to this problem, what other monies does this person need?
Um, they have a secondary mortgage of 13,000, so
Okay, so they got this $13,000 secondary mortgage. What else do they need to collect from the sales price?
the 25,000.
Yeah, they got a $25,000 line of credit. Anything else they need to collect?
Um, well, at least she has to get the 262.
Exactly, because she
She's
needs
nice
262,
to pay it
619
off.
for the first mortgage.
Mhm.
So all of these things together,
You have to add them up.
from here to here, all of this, that doesn't represent 100% of what she needs, but it is the majority of what she needs.
Right.
If so, at this point, what could we do? We know that we don't want to find 5.5% of 262. What
Mm.
could we do? What
Well,
percentage is everything else?
94.5.
There you go. So we know that all that yellow is 94.5% of the minimum sales price. How could we find the value of all of that yellow?
Well, we're gonna have to add up everything that, the costs that are needed, all the
Yeah.
amounts that are needed.
We got the 262, we got the 13,000, and we have the 25,000. So let's both do that math.
62,
Mm,
62, 619, added 13,000
What did you get? See,
plus the 25,000. 300,619.
that's what I got. 300,619. So we know that number,
Right.
300,619, is 94.5% of the minimum sales price. So how are we going to find that minimum sales price knowing that? What math could we do?
Do you multiply?
Don't multiply. We're going to think of,
Divide.
we're going to divide. Yep. So we're going to take that 300,619 and divide by 94.5%. And what do you get when you do that?
Um, I don't know. I think this is wrong. 318,100 and 15.
Why do you think that's wrong?
Oh, wait a minute. I do need a larger number.
That yeah, you do
Okay.
need a larger
Yep.
exactly
Okay.
because that number $318,115. I'm just going to leave it with no change. That is got to be the minimum sales price.
Right.
If she
Right.
doesn't
Okay.
sell it for at least that amount, she's not going to have enough money to pay you 6% off the top and
Pay
have enough to
everything
pay
else
off
that
her
she needs
bills.
to pay. Right. Right. Right.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So did that help a little bit for those
Yes.
types of problems?
Yes. 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 Okay.
Good, good, good. All right. So we talked about net to seller. The next type of problem we wanted to go over is going to be points and loan to value and all of those things. So let's take a look at this question. Borrower A is purchasing a home for $285,000 with a 95% LTV at an interest rate of 4.75%. What would 3 points cost him? Well,
Hmm.
we're talking about points. And do you know how much 1 point will cost?
I get mixed up on points and meals. Is it 1,000?
It's not 1,000, it is 1% of the
1%.
loan amount. So 1 point costs you 1%. If the bank tells you to pay 2% or 2 points, you're paying 2% of the loan amount. If the bank tells you to pay 3 points up front, then it's going to
Paying
cost you
3%.
3%. 1 point will always equal to 1% of the loan
1%.
amount,
Okay.
right? So in this case, they're telling us 3 points. So 3 points would be equal to what percentage?
3%.
3%. So we're looking for 3% of the loan amount. Does the problem directly tell you the loan amount?
No.
Okay. Does the problem tell you a way to find the loan amount?
Um, I'm not sure.
Okay, that's okay. And it does. It tells us that's what this LTV, it is telling us hey, we're borrowing 95% of the value because LTV stands for loan
To value.
to value. We're
Mhm.
comparing the amount of loan to the value of the
The
property. We're
property.
not borrowing 100% of what the property is worth. We are borrowing 95% of the value of the property. And if they're buying this house for $285,000, how do we find 95% of that? How do we find 95% of 285,000?
Of usually is a keyword for multiplication, right?
Very good. Yes. So we're going to do 285 times 95%. 5,000 times 95%. What did you get in your calculator?
1 second. It went out on me.
That's
One
okay.
second. 270,750.
And that is our loan amount.
Loan to value.
Well, yep, that's our loan to value is a 95 percentage. It's giving
1%.
us a percentage, but this
Our
is our
loan
loan amount.
amount.
That's right. And we
Okay.
need 3%
Of that
of
loan amount.
270,750. So what are we going to do? What math are we going to do to find 3% of 270,750?
Again, the word of
Mm-hmm.
gives us the key to
Multiplication.
multiply.
So 3% times 270, 250 or 750.
Is $812.25.
Let's see. Times 3%, $8,122.50.
Oh, okay. I got $800.
Let me make
Okay.
sure I did that right. Because it could be
270,
me.
750.
270, 750 times 3%. Yep, 8,000. So you may just not have put a decimal in the right place.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Right, because now I recalculated and it's $8,122.50.
There you go. So the cost, this was asking you, well, okay, they said 3 points, but what does that mean in real actual currency? How much money is that? And doesn't it sound so much nicer when the bank is like, yes, you need to pay 3 points versus write us a check for $8,000?
Right, exactly.
Okay. So we know what points will cost you, but why would you pay points? And there's a couple reasons why you could pay points. Mm. Points paid, we know they cost 1%, but think of them like the currency of real estate loans. Just like we did in that last problem, if they told you, oh, you're going to need to pay 3 points, 3 points sounds a lot nicer than $8,000.
Right.
But why would you pay points? It's going to be because, oh, you want to discount your
The loan.
loan interest rate.
Okay.
So maybe they're offering you 7% and you want to go to 6.5%. They're going to charge you some amount of points to get there.
Okay.
Or they could be using it just to really just cover up an amount, like usually like a loan origination fee.
Hmm.
Sometimes they could say $8,000 or they could have said 3 points. It's just they're going to say, oh, well, for every, there's some going to be some dollar amount. And I'm trying to think about how I could write this. We know, you know what I'll do? We'll just say 1 point equals 1%. They use this to cover up. And I say the word cover up and I kind of mean it, to cover up the true costs.
Right, the large amount.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But sometimes they do a yield. And we're going to take a look at this, but I'll explain it. You
Okay.
know that I'm assuming you know that banks sometimes borrow money to make money, like
Right.
to loan out. So let's say Bank of America borrows $1 billion from Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo doesn't just give them the money. Wells Fargo is going to maybe charge them 8.5%. Well, that means if they're going to make a loan, they need to charge you 8.5% or they're going to be at a loss. But if
Right.
you know you could go down the street to, I don't know, SunTrust, and SunTrust is offering loans at 8%, where are you going?
I'm going to SunTrust.
Right. Or what Bank of America says is, hey, we have 8% too. We're just going to ask you to pay some points because that's upfront, basically interest. They're charging you those points upfront so that you can have a lower interest rate later. Does that make sense? It's not that you asked for it to be lowered. They know they have to do competition and they need to get their yield up. They need to make more money off of you so that they can pay back this $1 billion from Bank of America.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, in this instance where you're having discount points, or in this instance where you're dealing with your yield, what we need to know is that 1 point moves an interest rate or it covers. Because, in this case over here, it would be covering that missing interest. It
Mm-hmm.
covers interest at a rate of 1/8 of 1%.
Okay.
Right. So this is where we can do fractions, or I can teach it to you using decimals. Which one would you prefer, fractions or decimals?
Decimals.
Okay. So do you know what the decimal is for 1/8 of 1%?
So that is the math of dividing
Yep.
8 into 1.
Yep. And what do you
Point
get when you do
previously.
that?
Let's see. 0.125.
0.125. So 1/8 is equal to 0.125. What that means is, okay, let's go back to this math up here, 8.5%. And let's say what you wanted was 8.25%. There's a gap here.
Mm-hmm.
And what we need to know is how many, that's a question mark, you just couldn't tell. How many 0.125s are there? Like you started at 8.15, and if you pay 0.125, does that make sense? If you pay 1 point, you've moved it 0.125. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Slightly.
Okay. So even though we're not going to use fractions to do the math, let's say you have 8, then you have 8 and 1/8, you'd have 8 and 2/8, eight and three
Okay,
eighths,
3/8.
eight
Okay.
and four
4
eighths,
Right.
8 and 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and then 8/8 would be 9. Now 8.5 is right here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just so you know, this is 8 1/4, and this is 8 3/4. So you started here, but you're trying to get right here.
Okay.
Every time you pay a point, you move one spot because there's a difference of 1/8 between 4/8 and 3/8, right?
Right.
And 1/8 equals, when you go from here to here, it's going to take you 0.125 or 1/8.
Okay.
If you go from 3/8 to 2/8, you moved an eighth, which is another 0.125,
Right.
right? So if you have 8.5% and you want 8 1/4%, well, then there are 2.125s between those numbers because it's 2 1/8.
Right. Okay. I'm following you now. Mm-hmm.
So if I did that, if I knew I had 8.5% and I wanted 8.25%, what's that amount of difference? What is the difference numerically between 0.5 and 0.25? What's the difference? If I do 8.5 subtract 8.25, what is the difference in those two numbers if you put that in your calculator?
Let's see. 0.25.
0.25. And if you wanted, okay, this is unrelated. Let's say you have 42 eggs and you needed to know how many dozen that was. You would take 42 and you would divide by 12.
12.
So
Mm-hmm.
if we've got 0.5 and we want to know how many 0.125s there are, we're going to take 0.5 and divide it by 0.125.
And you get 4. 0.5.
I'm
Point
sorry. I meant to do, sorry. I was like, wait, that's not the right answer. That's because I spoke to you wrong. It's 0.25. Remember, we got 0.25 up here. I just forgot the two. If we want to know how many 0.125s there are in 0.25, what do you get as an answer? That was my fault.
You said
Yes.
0.125
How many
divided by
0.125s are in 0.25? So 0.25 divided by 0.125.
5. 0.125.
Nope, other way. 0.25 divided
0.25.
by 0.125.
0.25. I'm sorry, my calculator is divided by 0.125. 2.
2. So really, we got 2 here and we got 2 down here. It's all kind of the same math. Does that make sense?
Okay. Okay.
So every time you pay a point, you move it 1/8.
Okay.
And 1/8 is equal to 0.125.
Yes.
And I wanted to show you that math because when we get to problems, when we ask, oh, how many points is it going to take to do something? We have to correlate 1/8 to be 0.125. If you want to move that interest rate, every time you pay 0.125%, you moved your loan an eighth.
Okay. I'm
So
making a
that's
note.
kind of a lot, but does that make sense? Yes.
It's starting to, yes.
All right. So let's try a problem. Jay would like to purchase a home with a $250,000 loan for 15 years at 7%. The bank initially offered him a loan at 7.5%. How many points would Jay need to pay to get his desired interest rate? So we got to figure out how many points he needs. And we have two interest rates here. We got
Right.
7.5% and we're trying to get to 7%. Right? We got to know what's the difference there. So the easy way to do this is to first subtract. Would you do me a favor and say 7.5% subtract 7%? Because isn't that going to be the difference between here and here?
I have 0.5%.
Yep, 0.5%. And if we remember back from our loan, or not our loan, our previous problem, you want to know how many points, and a point is worth 0.125. So we want to know if we have 0.5, how many 0.125s are there? Does that make sense why I'm doing that?
Yes.
All right. So
Yes.
what do you do? What do you get when you say 0.5 divided by
Divided
point?
by 0.125.
Mm-hmm.
You get 4.
That's your answer, 4 points. That's all you had to do.
Oh.
And now I could have done this just the first time, but and that's good. I could tell you, oh, just divide, but I want you to see why. Because you started at 7.5%, which is really 7 and 4/8. And when you paid a point, you were now at 7 3/8.
Eighths.
That was with one
Right.
point. And then when you paid another point, you were at seven
We're
and
7 2/8.
2/8. So that was another point. And then you would have been at
1/8.
7 1/8. That's another point. And then you would have been at 7. So that's
7.
another point. That's 1 2 3 4 points.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. It's 4/8. It's 4 points.
Right. Okay.
So did that kind of help tie it all together what we did beforehand?
Yes, it does.
So you can choose. If you get to the test and you're like, oh, I don't remember the eighths and the 0.125, all you need to do is draw this bad boy out and start counting. Just start 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, and just count how many hops. Or if you can remember that 1/8 is equal to 0.125,
1.25.
you just take the difference and divide it by 0.125.
Okay.
You like that?
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
the problem didn't ask us, but I'm going to do it anyway. It asked us for how many points it is. But you tell me, how much would it cost for those 4 points? We know it's 4 points, and I'll use a different color. What would that cost us?
I like to purchase for. So we're gonna take the 250,000
Mm-hmm.
and let's see, divided by 0.4%.
We're not going to divide. We're trying to find if it's 4 points, we know that's 4%.
So
So
we're gonna multiply
there
4%
you go.
of 250,000.
That's right. So we're going to take 250 and multiply by 4%. And what do you get?
10,000.
So 4 points is equal to $10,000. What sounds better to the borrower? Oh, we can sure give you a loan at 7%. You just need to pay us 4 points at closing.
Right. Instead of
Or,
the 10 to 10,000.
right? Because people like $10,000. No, that's okay. Yeah, I'll just go down the street.
Right. Right.
Okay. Did that help a little bit? Clear that one up?
It does.
Good. So then let's try this one. A home is purchased for $180,000, but is appraised for $175,000. The bank will make an 80% loan to value loan, LTV loan. The bank rate is 6 7/8, but but the investors demanded a 7 1/4 yield. The buyer will also be charged 1 point and loan origination fee. What will be the cost of all points? So I know at first when people read this, they're like, "Oh, that's a lot of numbers."
Mm-hmm.
But do all the numbers kind of make sense? Do you know what they're talking about with each number?
Yes.
Okay. So we know we're looking for the cost of all points. So when I read this problem, I see two different places that we're getting points charged. Can you tell me where those two different places are? Why are we getting charged points for two different reasons?
Well, the amount of the purchase of the home is 180,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we're being charged on that.
Yes.
Then right. And then you have to the 80%, the loan to value, the 80% of the loan to value.
Yes, you are doing the math. So we're going to have to do that. I guess what I was asking is, do you see that we have some points are coming from a loan origination fee and some points are coming from this investor demand with a yield?
Right.
You get what I'm saying now?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to figure out. I mean, yes, you are right. We're going to have to use that $180,000 to find a loan amount. However, as we plan what we're going to do in this problem, at the end of the day, we need to find the cost of all points.
Everything. Oh,
And
right.
we're going to have points come from two places. One from the loan origination fee is one place, and the second place we're getting them from is the
You.
yield. So according to this problem, how many points are you paying for loan origination fee?
You're gonna have the rate is 6 and 7/8.
But what are we paying for the loan origination fee? How many points are they charging us for the loan origination fee according to the problem?
1 point.
1 point. There we go. So we know we're going to have at least 1 point because of our loan origination fee. Does the problem tell us how many points we're going to need to make the investor yield?
No.
No. But it does tell us that the investor wants 7.25, and the bank is charging 6 7/8. So we have to find out what's the difference between here and here, and then charge the right amount of points.
Okay.
So before I go any further, does the understanding of that make sense why I'm saying
It
it?
does.
All right. So this is already an eighth, 6 7/8. And this is in quarters. So we could put this in eighths. I could make 6 and some amount of eighths, or I could put both of these in decimals. And this is where you have to decide what's easier. Some people think it's easier to just count out like 1/8 and then 6/8 and 5/8. It's easier. And some people can easily turn 6 and 7/8 into decimals. Which would you prefer? Now, before we do it, do you see how it could work either way depending on how you feel
I
about
do,
the
and it
math?
seems for me, it seems as if to leave it as a fraction is actually
Okay.
easier for
So
me.
we're going to do that. So 6 1/4 is worth how many eighths? Do you know how to figure that out?
I don't.
Okay. That's why we're here. So anytime you're doing something like this, I'm going to just draw. Doop, 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 doop. If you're at quarters and you want eighths, we need to know what could you multiply in order to get to eighths. 4 times what equals 8?
2.
So if I do times 2, it would give me 8. What I
Right.
do at the bottom, I have to do at the top.
It's not right.
So 1/4 is equal to how many eighths?
2/8.
There you go. So now I have 6 and 7/8, and I got 7 2/8. So let's count backwards.
Mhm.
What would be the number before 7 2/8? It would be 7 and, if we count backwards, what comes before 7 2/8?
We're counting backwards.
Counting backwards. We're at 7 2/8. What comes before 7 2/8?
1/8.
Very good. What comes before 7 1/8?
7.
Yep. What comes before 7? Before 7?
Um. Hmm. I don't know.
That would be 6 and 7/8.
I was gonna say 6 and 7/8.
Okay.
Okay.
And just because, what would come before 6 and 7/8?
6 and 6/8.
Mm-hmm. And so on and so forth, all the way. That
Right.
makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we want 6 and 7/8, so let's just stop here. We need to know how many eighths between here and here.
Right. Okay.
So this would cost us 1/8. This would cost us 2/8, and this would cost us 3/8. So there's 3 1/8,
3 1/8.
which is equal to 3 points.
Nice.
So to meet their yield, the bank
It
needs to
charges
charge
3
3
points.
points, and you got to pay that loan origination fee of 1 point. So when we add those together, it's a total of
4 points.
4 points. We need to find the cost of 4 points, which is equal to what percent?
4%.
All right, 4% of the loan amount. Whew. Now, all that, again, first of all, I'm going to say you probably won't have one quite this long, but these are basically two math problems in one.
One,
They could
right,
ask you about the loan origination, or they could ask you about the investor yield, or they could say, hey, the person wants this, but they got offered that. And I want to make sure you're comfortable with points no matter how they ask you. So
right.
you feel better about that now.
I do.
All right, well then let's finish this problem. We know we need 4% of the loan amount, and you had already started to do that. How are we going to find a loan amount?
Um, okay, so it's purchase well, for 80%. Okay, so we got the bank would make a 80% loan. We are going to we're going to multiply
Okay, we are going to multiply, but which numbers?
the 180,000 by the discount points of 4%.
Well, we're not going to do that just for a couple reasons. One is because the purchase price is $180,000. But they're not actually borrowing at $80,000. They're borrowing 80%
Percent of that,
of the
right?
80 of the value. Now, normally I would say, oh, multiply that by 180. Here's the problem. The house appraised for 175. So as far as the bank is concerned, what is the value of that house?
175,000.
So we're going to take that 175,000 and multiply that by 80% to get the loan amount. It's going to be up to the borrower to come up with any difference. So I'm going to take 175,000 and multiply it by 80%. And what did you get?
I'm getting my calculator acting up. 140,000.
There you go. 140,000 is the loan amount. So how do we find 40%? I'm sorry, 40%. How do we find 4% of 140,000?
4% of 140,000. That's when you multiply that.
That's right. So 140,000 times 4%. What would be the total cost of all points?
The total 5,600.
And I'm going to double check just because I don't know to make sure times 4%. Yep, $5,600 is the total amount of
Discount points.
all points. Well, you had we
Of
did no
all points.
discount points in this one. We had our yield points, our investor yield points,
And
and we
our
had our loan
loan
origination.
origination. Yeah.
All right. Do you feel like you got some clarity on those
Yeah,
points there?
it's becoming clearer to me now.
Good. And I
Yeah.
know it's going to take, just reviewing a little bit, but I
Mhm.
really wanted you to understand how they work. I know, and I'm glad I did because in this problem, you decided it was easier to deal with fractions
Practice. Yeah.
than with decimals. But in this problem, it was just easier to divide.
Mhm.
And I want you to have the skills
Both
to be
ways to
able to
do
do
it.
both ways,
Right.
depending on how you're feeling at the time. And overall, what I want you to remember when it comes to points, 1 point
It's more
costs
percent.
1%, but 1 point moves 1/8 of a percent, otherwise known as 0.125.
Yeah. I'm making a note of that so
Good.
that I can remember that.
Good, good, good. And so I don't want you to, and I know you said you just had a couple of points on that test. This could be being able to do your points questions and then being able to do the other question, that net to seller could be the difference between that passing and failing, man.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love it.
Exactly.
So I hope this helped.
It did.
Good, good, good. I love that.